An inciting incident is a term from the film world. It's an event in someone's life. It could be good or bad. It could be tremendous or it could be a tragedy, but it in some way defines the character's life. It pushes the protagonist forward in their vision and their mission in life. And so we wrote this book to try to help with that moment, that kind of cross-section where your dreams and your ambitions, your vision for your life comes to meet all the obstacles and barriers and disappointments that it might run into along the way. And so out of that, Inciting Incidents was born.
Well, we're here at Story to launch our book, Inciting Incidents. A book that was kind of dreamt of and born last year at Story 2011, and now at Story 2012 we get to launch the book. We chose these specific contributors for Inciting Incidents. Actually, myself and the team here in partnership with Sarah Cunningham, who is the curator on the project, they're great storytellers, and God's given them a unique story, each of them, to tell.
We didn't want it to be just 6 people's stories. We really wanted it to invite other people into the book and into our conversation and really into our shared life.
These contributors are able to tell their stories in a way that's so compelling that a reader can then come alongside and process those stories and then learn to heal in the midst of their own stories themselves.
And I hope that they'll read the book and not just read the book as indulging in the stories of the authors who have written it, but they'll actually think about their own story and their own plot line and where they want it to go.
The inciting incident I chose to write about in the book actually occurred not too far from this room. It was about 5 years ago. I was living in downtown Chicago, and I was acting full-time. Well, one night, it was probably 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, something just kind of jarred me out of bed. I was pacing and I was sweating, and my heart was racing, and I felt like something was really wrong with me. And I was so freaked out, I just went to the emergency room. It turns out that I had a panic attack. I'd never had a panic attack and didn't understand what was going on with me. As I started to kind of explore that incident, it became clear that it was connected to something that had occurred years before. And the story goes that I was sexually abused by 2 guys in my neighborhood when I was 9 or 10 years old. And that moment set me on a path of addiction to pornography, to sex. And the moment that I was experiencing in my bedroom, just a couple miles from here, was my body and God saying, something's wrong, we need to do something. So when Sarah approached me and invited me to participate in the project, I said yes immediately. So I knew that being a part of this project, one, would allow me to continue to do my own work of exploration, and then also two, along with this great collective of other amazing authors and other amazing stories, that as a book would give others the permission to do that as well, to explore their own story.
I don't know if I'd say I identified my incident. I think it identified me in terms of what happened to me was something I never invited or asked for. My father one night decided, in the middle of the night, that he was done with our family, he was done with his marriage, and he was deciding to leave. And he decided at 11:30 one night that that was when he wanted to be done, and so he walked out. And that was nothing that I asked for or was ready for or was intending on having a part of my life. Nobody wants a broken home or a broken family. So that changed the course of my life forever. His decision altered my whole life. And it's something that I can definitely identify as having a before and an after. Before, I was involved in a 2-parent home. We had family traditions, family vacations, meals together. And then after that night, I split to being everything apart. Then I had 2 homes, 2 traditions, 2 everything. I just had everything different after that moment, and it changed everything about my life. So I chose to write about this in the book because I just feel like we can all have something to offer as a part of our story in terms of pain and going through something. We all have something to offer that can step into somebody else's story. Henry Nouwen talks about being a wounded healer, and that we don't have to be over something, we don't have to have something all together, but just talking about our process and inviting the freedom of other people to talk about their process is what I hope for. And just being honest about where I am and kind of where my journey has taken me, I hope that it helps other people sort of take the steps and the courage to work through their grief.
Well, I've had a few inciting incidents in my life. I think the first inciting incident came when I was 9 or 10 years old. I was at a birthday party for a girl that I was in school with, and as all the kids were around her as she was opening up her presents, her mother was in the back filming this entire event. We're all anticipating this moment, right? When we get to that point in the party where we get to see ourselves on television. And so the mom takes the VHS and puts it in the VCR and hits play. And when the snow cleared, you see all these beautiful children sitting around in a circle. But then I looked closer and I saw this kid who was twitching his face and clearing his throat and opening up his mouth really, really wide, shaking his head. And my first thought was, who is this weirdo, right? Who invited this guy? And the closer I looked, I realized, much to my shame, that that kid was me. And really at that moment, I made a covenant with myself to never allow myself to be shamed like that again. A few months later, I was diagnosed with Tourette's syndrome. And so Tourette's has been a part of my life and my story for quite some time now, well ever since. It really spawned what I have called my imposter, who I named Super Dave. And Super Dave became the star athlete, the AP student, the hard worker. I had created a false self. I created a pressed, prompt, perfect, good-looking, always on time, athletic, funny, witty person to make sure that no one would ever see my broken self again. This war between little broken Dave and the demands of Super Dave wore my physical body in the ground. And on a Sunday morning, I was scheduled to preach at a very large church in Charlotte, and that morning my body couldn't keep up, and I had a panic attack at 2 a.m. in the morning. Found myself pinned to the bed. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't think straight, I was sweating, my skin was burning, and it was at that point that I realized I needed help.
A lot of times an inciting incident is something you can see approaching you, but a lot of times it shows up out of nowhere and you had no idea this was about to happen. That was the scenario in my case. I was at a conference in San Francisco, and through a very long, elaborate story, I ended up hitting my head, which sent me to the emergency room. And when I was there, they thought I had some bleeding on the brain. And when they did the MRIs and CAT scans, etc., they learned that I had a grade 2 oligoastrocytoma brain tumor, which is a glioma. It's like tree branches moving through my brain like chicken wire through a birthday cake. So it's inoperable. They can't remove it. I was given 5 to 7 years left to live, and this nice brunette woman sat down and looked at me and said, "You have cancer." And she got up and she left, and I was there by myself. And that was the door closing behind me and introducing me to the rest of my life. As a creative consultant, I tell stories for people. I help make films, or I help write books. My whole life has been about telling other people's stories. But I've always felt deep down that I had my own story that I wanted to tell, but was, to be honest, really afraid. And the other thing was that nothing bad ever really happened to me. I've led a very charmed life. And That ended pretty quickly when they said I've got 5 to 7 years left to live. A story was unfolding. I didn't know the end of it. I barely knew the beginning of it or the middle of it. All I knew was that something new was happening. And so when the opportunity for Inciting Incidents came up, I knew this was the story that I needed to tell and just start to kind of figure out how to document this, how to share this with people, even though I don't know all the answers yet.
If someone watching this, or if somebody who's reading the book feels like right now they're in the middle of an inciting incident, I would say that that's a really exciting stage to be in.
Oftentimes our feeling when we're exposing things that feel uncomfortable or are sometimes painful, our first response is to just move on. And I think that in that pain, God often wants to speak to us in ways that He can't when we're sort of, everything's going well.
It's kind of like the theory of touching a hot stove. We don't want to touch a hot stove twice because it hurts, and so we are conditioned to avoid pain at all costs and to not do something again and guard against it. But unfortunately, we cannot outrun pain and we cannot outrun grief.
We are all going to go through these inciting incidences. We're all going to deal with these struggles. So I would encourage people to document their stories, and if you feel comfortable, sharing it with even just family members or close friends. But if you're willing, there's a lot of people who want to hear your story. Share it with the world.
And so be who you are, not who you think you should be. Be your broken, pathetic self. And that's who we are. And then allow Jesus to come in that and to take over that and to shape and mold and bring beauty from those ashes. And then your life, as Paul says, is Christ. And for you to die is gain. That's the gospel. And that's what an inciting incident will lead you to.